So today we are going to take a look at Hitch 22 by the late Christopher Hitchens. This book is a memoir, and so I'll probably just talk more about Christopher Hitchens a little bit before going into the ratings. It's very well written. I'm a huge fan of Christopher Hitchens' prose. He's one of my favorite writers just in terms of the stylization of his kind of dry, sarcastic humor interlaced with kind of a little bit of a highbrowish type of vocabulary that is just at times very piercing and strikes to the heart of the matter in a way that's funny, sarcastic, dry, all these types of things. I think that he is often, in terms of when he is conveying like a factual piece of information, which isn't always the case, and we'll get into it. Like a lot of his utterances or like writings are like stylized, and he's talking about something that's more of an opinion than a fact. But when he gets into the facts, he is often very careful, it seems to me, with his research, and he is. I like that about him as well. So he is a journalist. He was born in the UK in, I think, the 50s, like the early 50s. And he moved to the US and he spent his life being a journalist. I think there's a quote out there somewhere where he said the reason he got into journalism is because he didn't want to take the news from other journalists, or like he didn't trust the journalists to give him the news, so he just got to do it yourself. He was active from about like the 70s until his death in 2010-ish, somewhere around there. He died of esophageal cancer. It's actually quite interesting in the book because there's two versions of this book. There's the early published version, and there's a second version where he rewrites the foreword when he knows he's dying, and he knows he has like a 5% chance to live with his current treatment for his cancer. And so I found it tremendously interesting because a lot of times I feel like you don't necessarily get, or it's a little bit of a rare piece to read where someone knows that they're dying and they're writing about their life and also the process of dying. He's probably best well known, or became well known, for there was like this a bit of an anti-theistic movement following the September 11th attacks on the United States, where there was a lot of people writing against Islam specifically, and Hitchens is among these people. He writes against religion overall. He liked to characterize himself as an anti-theist, so like a hyped up atheist, which isn't like something I like him for as much, because I think that his position is too strong, even though I am also an atheist. I think that he thinks religion's like bad, and I think it's neutral. But I think that this is largely why he became popular. He did a ton of debates where he debated anyone who wanted to debate him on God after he wrote his book, God Is Not Great. And the subline is Why Religion Poisons Everything. Also, the title is like strong. If you are denouncing Islam specifically, which he wasn't doing it specifically, God Is Not Great would be like the title for your book, because I think Allahu Akbar is God is great in Arabic. Anyways, so why I like Christopher Hitchens is that first of all, he's very left-leaning, and I think he does something that not a lot of people on the left do, or he did. He had a certain like stylization or a way of communicating that not a lot of people on the left did. He would better be characterized as like a libertarian than a liberal. I think he would be quite disturbed by the way in which the left seems to be leaning on free speech now. I think he would find that very problematic. And I like him because a lot of times he can hold an opinion that is very contrary to kind of the stream that he's swimming in, so to speak. He, like, for example, was a huge supporter of the Iraq War, on the basis that, and he had gone to a lot of the countries in the Middle East. Like, that was a big part of, like, his journalism, and he was a huge supporter of the war, not on the basis that there were WMDs in Iraq or something like that, but just on the basis that Saddam was a terrible person, and from a humanitarian perspective, it was, necessary. As well as Saddam, like, violated whatever treaty he signed after the first Gulf War, where the, like, punishment for the violation of that treaty was getting invaded. So it was, like, appropriate anyways in terms of international stuff. And I remember, like, one debate where he was talking to someone on, like, cable news, and like, halfway in the middle of the discussion, he just asks the guy to name, like, 3 countries that are adjacent to Iraq, and the guy can't do it, and then he's like, you don't know anything about what you're talking about. Another one is when pressed for, this woman in an interview said that his facts weren't really facts, or something like this, in his polemicist, or in his attacks on Hillary Clinton, and he was like, name one instance where, like, I gave bad facts. He's like, name one. Just one. One will do. And you have to really know that you have not made any mistakes to just ask someone to name one instance of making a mistake, you know? Because obviously if they name a single one, you look like an idiot. But if you can't name one, you look great. And he was also a bit of a polemicist, so he attacked people. Like, this was his shtick. Dragging people through the mud, which I don't think there is too much of on the left, in terms of, it's qualitatively different than I think the way, like, Hitchens did it. He wrote books attacking the Clintons, Kissinger, Mother Teresa, and obviously one attacking God, which, okay, but like, the Clintons at that time were not, like, disliked. This was when the Clintons were well liked among liberals, and he went after them. And then also, obviously, Mother Teresa is extremely well liked, and he attacked her on a variety of things. He also called the book he named the book The Missionary Position, and he said he named it that because sacred cow might be too offensive. But so he really goes after individuals, and I want to emphasize that I think that it is his really sharp wit that I am admiring more so than necessarily the particulars of who he's attacking. Like, I don't have a strong opinion on Mother Teresa. I dislike the Clintons, I dislike Kissinger, and I don't have a strong opinion on God. And so, but he had a high willingness to hold a contrarian opinion to, like, the rest of what was going on, if he felt that he had good evidence for that. And I would have been very curious to see what he would make of, like, what's going on today, in terms of having a thinker around that I really wish was around that wasn't. I can't think of anyone who, other than more than Christopher Hitchens, that I'd rather have around right now. Because the world has changed so much since 2010, and I think there's a lot of things that he would be critical of. Like, I think he would have been, so he was, like, big on liberty, and the rights of individuals. He identified as a humanist. I think my favorite essay of his is anti-death penalty essay. It is titled Scenes from an Execution, and it was published in Vanity Fair in 98. And it's this, I forgot where I was going with that. Anyways, so I think I got through all my points. Yeah, I got through all my points. I really wish Christopher Hitchens was still around. There's, like, maybe 5 people who I'm, like, really sad that they died on the basis of their contributions to the public discourse, and Christopher Hitchens is probably at the top of that list. Which it's not, I want to emphasize, it's not because I agree with everything he wrote, but he had a way of thinking that I think was profoundly in good faith, and he was also combative. I think that a lot of the people who are really combative in terms of their thinking, well, first of all, there aren't too many people on the left that are combative in, like, this type of way that I'm thinking. They're mostly on the right, so it's also, it's a bit refreshing. but Hitchens. But I also think a lot of the people who are combative in a bad faith sort of way, where they are not trying to get to the truth of the matter. They are instead trying to smear or make the other person look stupid, talk over, like this type of thing. They're like in it to get the zinger, and they have a low fidelity to like the actual core of the issue, which I don't think was the case necessarily with Christopher Hitchens, although I think he was like wrong about some things. But I think that he focused on, I always think that he was like in good faith about it and not just like a shill or a sellout or whatever. Anyways, let's get into the ratings. For utility, I give it a 3. I don't think you're going to get too much out of this book, but I do think, because it's just him talking about his life, and I can't really think of things in there that are like particularly like useful, but to the extent that it introduces one to Christopher Hitchens, that's where I think it gets its usefulness. But you don't have to read this book to like look into Christopher Hitchens stuff. In fact, I would, if you were interested in Christopher Hitchens, I would recommend the essay rather than his memoir. And I would have a hard time. You would have to already be a fan of Christopher Hitchens for this memoir to be good, and in that case, I still don't think it would be useful. I just think it would be entertaining. Scores low on the utility. For novelty, I gave it a 5.5, which is a bit of a high score, I think, because a lot of this stuff that he talks about is like history that's passed from like quite a while, or like the context of history, and it's 5.5 because I think Christopher Hitchens is worth looking into, especially if my description of him, is a bit intriguing. I suggest looking into Christopher Hitchens, and that's where the novelty, like that's where the score comes from for in terms of novelty, is just introducing one to Christopher Hitchens, which you really don't need this book to do. So maybe I should have scored lower on the novelty. That's I probably should have, because that's like it. For entertainment, I gave it a 7, and Christopher Hitchens is one of the few writers that I think like spikes the entertainment score just based on their style alone. I really like his writing style. It's funny. It's his humor is like really in line with where I'm at. There's like memoirs don't make good narrative structure because it's not like rising action, climax, falling action, whatever, like traditional narrative. So generally they would score low, but I found this quite entertaining, so I gave it a 7. For style, I gave it a 9. Maybe it should be a 9.5. I'm not entirely sure. I'm just a huge fan of his like writing stylistically. He's probably like top 5 for me, and he's also an extremely strong speaker, which is also nice if you like wanted to like try and find videos of him on YouTube. Although I would caution, the vast majority of them are like religion based, so just be aware that you're coming into that perspective of his. Whether like if you're into that, then cool. But if you're not into that, then be picky about the videos, I guess. But style 9. I should have selected some passages to read, but it's just very sharp. For readability, I give it a 6. Normally, when something has like good style, so it's written well, and his not the case that like his sentences are well structured. You don't have these sentences where like the clauses are in the wrong order, the ideas are like organized in such a way that it makes the sentence harder to read. All the sentences are like written well for the most part. The reason why it doesn't score higher on readability is because sometimes there can be a few long sentences and his vocabulary is pretty broad, and so I think it in some ways can be harder to read, but okay. And so for interest, I gave it a 6. I found it interesting because I like Christopher Hitchens a lot, but it's not, I don't think there's a ton of information in there that is like going to be new and like mind shattering. It's him talking about his life, and there are some interesting things I learned in there because that I did not like know about Hitchens, which I feel like I shouldn't say because spoilers. I guess spoilers, like his mom committed suicide, which I was not aware, and his like he was like semi-bisexual. It's really hard to pin that down because he talks about being a heterosexual, but then also talks about a bunch of like homosexual experiences he had, which to me seems incongruous at best, and so I'm not sure whether to label it like. I think maybe he just wouldn't appreciate the label and would just want to say love is love, and if you don't like that, fuck off. With that kind of tenor. And he was, so yeah, that was interesting. His father was also like a naval commander. I knew that. One thing that's pretty interesting that you don't really get much of in the book, he doesn't talk about his brother very much, but his brother, he went to private school, his brother went to public school, because the thing in England at the time was to save up money and send your eldest to a really nice school and try and drag your, like, your family up a little bit, or claw your way up. And his brother is like the opposite of him in terms of thinking, but kind of communicates in a similar style. I don't like his brother, or his brother uses the same similar types of like rhetorical devices and flourishes, but I don't think his brother is as sharp as Hitchens. But they have like the complete opposite views. His brother Peter Hitchens is very, very conservative, and there's a debate where he debates his brother on two things, God and the Iraq War. And it's just a very interesting debate because here you have this liberal that's pro-Iraq war and anti-God, and then you also have this conservative that is anti-Iraq war and pro-God. It's that debate is just fascinating. And they also, it's just like this giant debate in a church. Anyway, so like that thing is just fascinating because like, but you don't get much of that in the book, that his brother is like thinks a lot differently than him. But okay, so there are some interesting things in the book if you have an interest in Christopher Hitchens that you might not have known. For me, the two biggest was the mother and also him being however you want to characterize his sexuality. And I think this comes out to an overall score of like really low 6.08. As far as recommendations go, if you don't know anything about Christopher Hitchens, I actually would not recommend reading this book. I would recommend reading his essay, Scenes from an Execution, which was in Vanity Fair 98. I'm sure that you can find the essay just by Googling it. Or like some free version of the essay. I assume you can find it. If not, you could also just YouTube Christopher Hitchens. He's also a strong speaker in addition to a strong writer. And so my recommendation, if you're not familiar with him, would not be to read this book, but would be to familiarize yourself with Christopher Hitchens some other way. If this sounds intriguing, if he sounds off-putting based on my description, then don't. If you like Christopher Hitchens, I would recommend this book. I mean, it's Christopher Hitchens writing, and it's entertaining, and I suppose I liked it more than his collection of essays, because his collection of essays included like a lot of intros to books, which I wasn't that keen on reading. I guess I could have just skipped over those. And his prose is just very strong no matter what he's writing. I almost don't care what I'm reading when I'm reading Hitchens, because it's not like in some ways he never it's not like he is, his specialization is writing and he's a journalist, right? And it's not like this construction of ideas, and so there's no like piece of Christopher Hitchens which I'm like, man, this is like necessary critical Christopher Hitchens thought, other than I suppose the anti-death penalty essay, but even then it's not the strongest arguments in terms of opposing the death penalty one could have. And so I would really read him particularly for his style, more so than his ability to his arguments are tremendously strong, but his ability to construct ideas isn't what I would read him for. So if you already like Christopher Hitchens, I think that this is a reasonable shout, But you could also just read something else of Christopher Hitchens, and I think that it would also be equally reasonable, probably. So I would not necessarily recommend this book higher than the collection of essays I've read of his. But I would recommend him in general. Anyways, for discussion question, I actually think this is a really interesting one, if you've gotten to the end of the video here. And that is, are there any thinkers that you think would be especially timely for like what's going on now that you wished were still alive but they're dead? Which, I mean, this is somewhat of a depressing topic, but man, I really wish Christopher Hitchens was still alive, because I think that he would be properly critical of a lot of things that I think that a lot of people are... Right now, I think a lot of people have blinders, and they only see what's wrong with the other side. This is in the United States, and I'm talking about polarization. And I think Christopher Hitchens was particularly good at seeing what's wrong with his side. And so while he was extreme... And, I mean, he also saw what was wrong with the other side, like equal opportunist here. But what is particularly striking now is I don't think he would have had these blinders where he's only seeing what's wrong with, the other side. And I think that that is something that is, like, sorely missed right now. Because, and maybe Christopher Hitchens, like, maybe it's in the nature of the medium, and, like, he would have gotten his, like, YouTube channel, and then he would have, like, gone down this rabbit hole of, just, like, hammering, like, hyper-partisan points, which I think happens to a lot of thinkers, in a way that is, like, really disappointing, because you like this thinker, and then you start realizing that they have completely abandoned their capacity for nuance, and looking at things in multiple perspectives, and also being critical of what would largely be characterized their side. Christopher Hitchens didn't have these problems. So I really wish he was still alive, but he's not, unfortunately. Anyways, have a good one.